Yes. Hello, everybody. It's time to fight for church-state separation like your life, freedom, and country depend on it. They do. That's what Rachel Lazar, leader of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, tonight's guest speaker, said in the Chicago Tribune last month. I'm Nancy Friedman, president of the Houston chapter of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. We're very excited to welcome Rachel Lazar, our organization's new president and CEO, to Houston for the very first time, and we're excited that all of you can be here with us to greet her, but more importantly, to listen to what she has to say about this important issue. She's going to explain tonight why she said what she said when she talks about church-state separation in Trump's America, where we are and where we're going. And I'm sure that part of her talk will also be pertinent to us here in Texas, to church-state separation in Abbott's and Patrick's, Texas. Because we've seen in Texas the same type of efforts that we've seen on the national level and in other states in this country to redefine religious freedom as the right to impose one's religious beliefs on others. If you're a woman, a member of the LGBTQ community, a religious minority, or non-religious person, if you believe, like most Texans, according to a recent poll, that a business should not be allowed to refuse service based on a customer's sexual orientation or sexual identity, even when the business says that homosexuality violates the business owner's religious beliefs, or if you're a person who wants to freely choose a faith and support it voluntarily, or follow no religious or spiritual path at all, without the government promoting religion over non-religion or promoting one faith over another, then you have cause to be concerned about what's going on in this state and in this country. Americans United believes that religious freedom is the right for each of us to decide which religion to follow, if any, without government coercion or interference. Religious freedom ensures that you can decide where to pray and how to pray and whether to pray. That you cannot be banned from entering this country because of your religion, and that no one else can use his or her religious beliefs to harm you or to take away your civil rights or your civil liberties. Americans United is a nonpartisan educational and advocacy organization dedicated to advancing the separation between religion and government as the only way to ensure freedom of religion, including for those who believe and those who do not believe, for all. Americans United is the only national organization that devotes 100% of its time to this cause. Our resources, our efforts to preserving and promoting church-state separation. We have a dedicated, accomplished, and highly respected staff, not just Rachel Lazar, but those others on the staff. They are respected so much that our organization, is considered the expert in this field and is looked upon for guidance and leadership. Well, we're glad that you're all here tonight to learn, to share, to be with others who share your concern about what's going on, and to hopefully join our work to maintain this wall between religion and government that protects us all. First, I want to get to the business portion of our meeting. This is, after all, our chapter's 2019 annual meeting. Now that the meeting has been called to order, I want to tell you briefly about what our chapter has been doing the last year since our last annual meeting. We have been focusing on both the educational and the advocacy aspects of Americans United's work. Last summer, we co-hosted with Equality Texas and the Texas Freedom Network a town hall about the United States Supreme Court's decision in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. You'll remember that's the case where a Colorado baker refused to serve or create a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. In support of Americans United's participation in a national coalition to try to stop Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the United States Supreme Court, Our chapter organized a Stop Kavanaugh call to action at which representatives of other community organizations, including Labor, Planned Parenthood, Equality Texas, and others, also spoke about their concerns over Kavanaugh's record and judicial philosophy. Last fall, our chapter held an event for members at the home of one of our board members, where we had another member of AU staff, our National State Legislative Council, as well as a local expert, address what to expect on church-state separation from the upcoming Texas legislature. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, gosh, I don't remember hearing about those events, especially if you're a member, then I'm going to ask you to make sure that we have a valid email address for you, because we communicate most of our information about our events to people, both members and non-members, via email. And also I'm going to ask you to watch for email from us. We typically send monthly email messages so our members know when our monthly board meetings are, because we invite our members to attend all of our board meetings. They are open meetings. We also send, of course, more email when we're having a program like this. And sometimes we send action alerts. If you aren't getting our email, you might want to check your junk mail or spam folders, or contact us to let us help you figure out why you aren't getting our email. And of course, if you aren't already on our email list, we hope you have signed up or will sign up tonight so you can be added to our list. You don't need to be a member to be on our list or to come to these programs, although that certainly would be a good thing for you to do. Over the past year, we've also continued our educational efforts by speaking to different community groups about AU, about our cause, about the Johnson Amendment. So if you're a member of a group or a media outlet, we've also appeared on the radio, local radio programs. If you're a member of any of those kinds of groups that invites guest speakers, please invite us. Contact us. We have several people who are capable speakers, and we're happy to come and talk to your organization about our issues, about the cause, because after all, the way that we're going to prevail to preserve separation between religion and government is to spread the word, to help other people know about the issue and what they can do to help us preserve it. Now, our chapter has done all of this as volunteers because although we do have a wonderful staff at our office in Washington, D.C., our Houston chapter has no staff. So I want to introduce you to our board members who have helped put on these activities for the last year. And if you don't mind, board members, either stand up or raise your hand so everybody can see you. Maida Asofsky, our vice president. Bobby Cohen, our treasurer. Justin Schweitzer, our secretary. Mary Beth Davis. Al Khan. Dinesh Singhal. George Talashay, who could not be with us tonight because he's out of town. I also appreciate all of the volunteers who have helped us with tonight's event, especially Al Khan and Carrie Dodrell, who organized tonight's event. You know, our chapter prides itself on being sort of a little informal here, so we all like to enjoy ourselves while we do this important work. But you know, our strength and influence comes from our numbers and our voices. So I hope that you will consider, if you aren't already a member of our organization, joining. You can join tonight if you wish. And did you know you can give a student membership for free? So if you have a child or a grandkid who's in school or you're going to school yourself, this might be a great gift for them. I hope you'll consider, if you are a member, keeping your membership current. I hope you'll consider acting when you get an action alert from either the national organization if you are on its email list or from us when we send it to you. I hope you'll consider sharing our information by Facebook, because Mary Beth, who's been our Facebook guru, has promised to continue maintaining that Facebook page for us. So either share our information by Facebook if you're a Facebook user yourself, by email, or by whatever method you use to convey information to others. And I hope you'll consider volunteering with us, whether it's volunteering at one event, like some of our volunteers are doing tonight, or getting more involved with us, as some of our board members have done before they joined our board. The more help that we have from you, the more we can do, and the more our organization can accomplish, and the more we are all helped and protected. So with that, I'll adjourn tonight's business meeting. And I'm going to call upon Al Khan, who's a board member and one of the co-chairs of tonight's event, to introduce Houston City Council member Ellen Cohen.
Okay, good. All of that's done. That's a formality that's very important because we are a formal organization and we need to take care of our business. But now the fun starts. We will introduce Rachel in a few minutes, but we thought because we are so excited that she is here and because this is so important for our organization going forward that we really wanted to give her a proper welcome. And so I have arranged for Ellen Cohen, who is a member of Houston City Council and Mayor Pro Tem, who herself has a distinguished career as executive of nonprofit organizations, state representative, and now member of City Council for 8 or 10 years, and who is obviously well qualified to welcome Rachel to Houston, representing our community and representing our values. So I don't need to say anything else, but I want to invite Ellen to please come up and welcome.
Thank you all very much. It's really my pleasure to be here and to represent the city as the Mayor Pro Tem. Just a quick story. When the mayor nominated me to be Mayor Pro Tem, I had to be voted in by my fellow colleagues on council. And afterwards there was a reception and a woman came up to me and she said, "Congratulations on being Mayor Pro Tem." And then she paused and looked at me and said, "What's Mayor Pro Tem?" So I think most of you know, if our mayor is unable to perform his duties at any time, I have the supreme pleasure of being able to step in for him. But tonight I'm here to welcome our special guest on behalf of the city of Houston. And I understand that this is Rachel's first visit, not just to Houston, but to Texas. And so, yahoo, we're really happy. And also, in case, Rachel, you don't believe in climate change, typically our weather is about 65, 63 degrees. So this humidity is just really unusual for us. We're very glad you're here, and Houston is proud to be the most diverse city in the nation. We're diverse in all ways, not just race and ethnicity, but also gender identity and sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and most germane to today's discussion, we have very diverse religious representation. We have a lot of experience in Texas and Houston with the separation of church and state, or lack thereof. In Houston a few years ago, City Council passed HERO, the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, that would essentially ban discrimination, including on religious grounds, in housing, employment, public accommodations. Unfortunately, although most of the testimony we received during the hearings was in support of HERO, there was a small but very vocal opposition, primarily from the Christian megachurches. They turned HERO into the bathroom bill, which is a fight that was then only just beginning around the country. We passed it on City Council, but they got petitions to put it on the ballot citywide, and it failed because of fake news. During the HERO testimony, there was a very telling exchange I had with a prominent pastor's wife. When I said, suppose if I'm asking for service at a store and my faith, being Jewish, is something that troubles them, they have the right to refuse me service? And she said, yes. And I said, so you're saying, yes, they do have the right to refuse me service as someone of the Jewish faith? And she said, yes, I'm saying that, but that is not the issue that we're talking about today. That perspective has been echoed in new religious liberty bills in state legislatures around the country, including Texas. Here in Texas, a big example is the continual attempts the Texas legislature makes every session to take away a woman's right to make her own health choices. These attacks have escalated enormously in the past few years under the guise of religious liberty. But what happens when I don't share the religious view you seek to impose? Unlike some Christians' views, for example, my Jewish faith permits abortion. Rabbi Scott Hausman Weiss recently wrote a very interesting piece in Houston Chronicle about this very question. He notes that, quote, "For many branches of Christianity, the soul is believed to enter the body at the moment of conception, and so to end this life would be an act of murder. For Jews, however, the soul doesn't enter the body until birth, thus giving the entity in a mother's womb a very different legal status than a full human being. In the Jewish tradition, the question is not when does life begin? The question is, when does life begin to be human?" End quote. This very important distinction drives our Jewish perspective on this issue. In my opinion, your religion says abortion is wrong, then don't get one. But why should your religion... But why should your religious views supersede or, and I hate this, trump mine? But to me, this is the heart of the need for a separation between church and state. Thank you all for being here. And Rachel, I am truly looking forward to what you have to say. Welcome to Texas.
Thanks very much, Ellen, for those inspiring words. And now we're going to hear some more inspiring words from Rachel Lazar. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about her and her background. Some people call 2018 the Year of the Woman. Well, you could say it was the Year of the Woman at Americans United, because that's when Rachel Lazar became the first woman to lead our organization. And she's also the first non-Christian person to lead Americans United. Now, I'm a member of the National Board of Directors and one of the people who interviewed Rachel when she was applying for the position, and one of the people that chose Rachel as our new leader. And I can tell you, she was not chosen because of those two characteristics I just mentioned. She was chosen because we, the board members, thought she was the right person to lead our organization at this time and into the near future. And who knows, maybe into the next 2 or 3 decades. We'll see if she wants to do it that long. And after all, why not? She's smart. She's a graduate of Harvard University and the University of Chicago Law School. She's capable and dedicated, and she understands the importance of explaining how our issues have a nexus with other issues that are of critical importance at this time, and the importance of collaborating with others. But that's not a surprise either, because she spent her professional career doing that. She was deputy director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, where she worked to further its mission of strengthening the separation of religion and government. And she also ran interfaith campaigns there on a number of critical issues, including LGBTQ equality, immigration reform, gun violence prevention, and paid sick, family, and medical leave. Before working at the RAC, she directed the culture program at Third Way, a progressive think tank specializing in understanding and reaching moderates. There, she launched the Come, Let Us Reason Together initiative, which mobilized, believe it or not, evangelical Christians and liberals to work together on critical issues, including abortion and LGBTQ equality. She also helped draft the first of its kind Common Ground abortion bill to be introduced jointly by pro-choice and pro-life members of Congress. But what I've been able to observe firsthand by interacting with her is the inspiration and energy she conveys to others on AU staff, to the board members, to other supporters of AU, and to members of other organizations, as well as other people that she speaks with. But don't just take my word for it. At last year's annual meeting of Americans United in Washington, D.C., we were honored to have with us Barry Lynn, our recently retired executive director, who a lot of you had a chance to meet during his frequent visits to Houston, or you might have seen him during his frequent media appearances on radio or television. And what Barry said was, "I think you have chosen an extraordinary leader in Rachel." Then addressing her directly, he said, "I think you will lead us into the next period of time, no matter what happens in the midterm elections, no matter what happens in 2020. I think you've done this organization proud already." So I'm very proud to have Rachel here tonight and for you to have the opportunity to hear her and hear her talk about these issues that are of such great importance to all of us. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you.
I'd like to start by reading you a quote. Quote, "The right to believe or not believe is the most fundamental of freedoms. When religious liberty is denied or destroyed, we know that other freedoms, freedom of speech, of press, assembly, and even democratic institutions themselves, are imperiled." Does anyone want to hazard a guess as to who may have said this? Thomas Jefferson? Any other guesses? James Madison. I can tell you that nearly every time I ask this question, someone has said, at least Thomas Jefferson. But in fact, these are Vice President Pence's remarks Hoosier, at the U.S. State Department's Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom that from last July. It's about to happen again. These words sound fine, right? He's recognizing non-theists. He's acknowledging the importance of religious freedom to democracy. We agree. It sure doesn't sound like the words of someone whose use of religious freedom to undermine the rights of LGBTQ people was so extreme back when he was governor of Indiana that the state lost $60 million of business over it. And it doesn't sound like the words of someone who, in concert with President Trump and his allies, is making every possible use of his power to grant special privileges to far-right evangelical Christians and to license their agenda of turning back the clock on equality and inclusion for LGBTQ people, women, religious minorities, and the non-religious. Less surprising is how Pence's speech ends with a declaration that belief in God is what gives Americans freedom. Quote, "For as the Bible tells us, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So freedom always wins when faith in Him is held high. May God bless you and your nations, and may God bless the United States of America." Close quote. The story I want to tell tonight is about the clever strategy that the religious right and the highest level of government officials in America are using to co-opt the term religious freedom to advance their political agenda. It's about the rhetoric not matching the reality. It's an ugly story about the politicization of one of America's most cherished and sacred principles and the use of it to discriminate and hurt people. And it's a story about a grave threat to true religious freedom for all Americans and to our democracy. First, I'll spend a little time reminding us what true religious freedom means, and Nancy spoke some to that, how it's core to our identity as a country, and why you can't have it without separating religion and government. Then I'll describe how religious freedom today is under attack, and what's worse, how it's being misused to crumble the wall of separation of church and state and turn back the clock. Finally, I'll talk about Americans United's new focus on building a national movement to safeguard religious freedom and church-state separation in America for generations to come. But before I speak further, I would like to thank Councilwoman and Mayor Pro Tem Ellen Cohen for her kind introduction, and Nancy Friedman for her introduction and her longtime commitment to Americans United. She's a member of our Board of Trustees and chapter president here, as you all probably know. I'd also like to thank, let's see if I can get this right, Al and Carrie. I know I don't have to tell you all that Texas is like ground zero for attacks on separation between church and state. But the thing is, our opponents are often outmatched by the enthusiasm, commitment, and hard work of Americans United supporters in Houston, from Nancy and Al to all of you. And you give us hope, and we truly couldn't do it without you. Back to business. First, a short history lesson on religious freedom and how core it is to America. I know this is more of a review for many of you, but we still need this refresher right now because religious freedom is so misunderstood today in America, in our political climate, and it's also so easy, at least where I live, maybe not here, to take it for granted. When the Puritans fled England and Holland in search of religious freedom, it was really only for themselves. Their Massachusetts Bay colony was set up as a theocracy, actually, and any deviation from a strict system of religious laws could result in imprisonment or even grotesque forms of punishment like flogging. But as more people representing other faith traditions came to our country, diversity spread, and a real thirst for meaningful religious freedom began to grow in several colonies. And all we needed to set off the spark were some bold thinkers to demand the right of conscience. Historians, as well as Supreme Court justices, widely regard the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom as the foundation of how the framers of our Constitution and of the First Amendment approach matters of religion and government. Thomas Jefferson drafted the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom in 1777 to protect those who deviated from or dissented from state-sanctioned Anglican church laws at that time in the new state of Virginia. And it became law in 1785 thanks to his buddy, James Madison. For modern-day Americans, it's hard to believe that Virginia actually required its citizens to attend Sunday Anglican church services. And journalist Frederick Clarkson notes that failure to attend those services was actually the most prosecuted crime in Virginia for many years. But with the passage of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, people were no longer required to worship at a state church. Jefferson emphasized that the aim of his statute was to protect, quote, the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and Mohammedan, the Hindu and the infidel of every denomination. Take a minute to think about how radical that idea was in 1785. It's also important to note that Jefferson's list includes the Gentile and the Christian. Back in that day, it was well understood that religious freedom was key to protecting and even strengthening all beliefs, including mainstream Christianity. As Roger Williams, the Baptist theologian who founded Rhode Island in 1636 as the first colony to separate church and state, famously said, "Forced worship stinks in the nostrils of God." In other words, religious freedom allows people to come to their beliefs on their own instead of being coerced. America's founders got that. So religious freedom was designed to protect all Americans' freedom of conscience, from Christians to the non-theist. What is religious freedom? It's like Nancy was saying, the freedom to be religious, not to be religious, to change our belief system over the course of our lifetime, to freely criticize religion, one particular religion or religion in general, and to protect whatever religion, to practice whatever religion we want in whatever way we want, so long as we aren't harming others. I'll come back to that. Forging our own spiritual path is a great American tradition. When Jefferson, who went on to be our third president, was asked to describe his faith, he replied, "I am a sect by myself as far as I know." As one of our great presidents, Abraham Lincoln, might have identified himself with no religion. He might have been what we call today a none, N-O-N-E. Lincoln never joined a Christian church, and while he spoke of God, he never spoke of the Trinity or Jesus, which are core concepts of the Christian faith, especially in that day. As a young man, he stood out. It's rumored, and I don't know if it's true, that he attended a revival and was asked by an evangelist if he intended to go to heaven or hell, and he reportedly quipped, "I intend to go to Congress." And I want to emphasize that separating religion and government is the linchpin of religious freedom. So when the Founding Fathers wrote the First Amendment, they baked church-state separation right into it. So here's Jefferson again, this time writing about the First Amendment in 1802 in a famous letter to the Danbury Baptists in Connecticut. He wrote, "I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state." And as you just heard, the First Amendment has two religion clauses, the Free Exercise Clause and the Establishment Clause, which is really about not establishing religion. So the Establishment Clause puts a limit on the Free Exercise Clause. They work together to protect religious freedom for all. The Establishment Clause ensures that no one can impose their religion on you, so that you are free to believe whatever you want. The Establishment Clause also prohibits the government from disparaging or endorsing any one religion or religion over non-religion. Here's another really important part of the Establishment Clause. It prevents the government from licensing harm to others in the name of religious freedom. Why? Because when the government makes me pay the cost of your religious freedom, it's favoring and preferring your religion to mine. And the Establishment Clause prevents the government from playing favorites. So we like to say at Americans United that religious freedom is a shield that protects, not a sword to cause harm or discriminate. Religious freedom for all and church-state separation should be a given in America. Unfortunately, though, the wall of separation is crumbling today, and especially in Texas. So let's get into that. Earlier this year, I met with a group of students from Stanford University. They came on a spring break trip. And I asked them, what comes to mind first when you think about religious freedom? Right out of the gate, one student responded, homophobia. There was soon a consensus behind that in the room. Rather than the lofty goals behind our country's commitment to religious freedom that I just spoke of, these young adults equate it with discrimination. And they're not crazy to think that. Here's another true story to illustrate why, and hopefully this story will sound familiar to you as members. Aimee Madonna, anyone? Sound familiar a little bit? Yep. Lives in Simpsonville, South Carolina, with her husband and 3 kids, 2 of whom are autistic. Sitting in her living room this past winter, I witnessed firsthand what a devoted mom she is. Aimee has a dad who grew up in the foster care system, and he wanted to give back. And so Aimee grew up with hundreds of foster care siblings throughout her childhood, some for a day, some for a week, some for months. And Aimee, now that she has the resources and ability to do the same, wants to foster and work with foster kids, bring them into her home, teach her children the same values. So she found a foster care agency in Simpsonville called Miracle Hill Ministries. She applied, Miracle Hill Ministries found her qualified, everything was great, until they asked her for the name of her church. When she told them the name of her Catholic church, they told her, sorry, we only work with Protestant Christians. I have to skip ahead because I got way ahead of myself. So When the governor of South Carolina heard about this, instead of preventing it, he doubled down and issued an executive order specifically to allow state-funded foster care agencies to reject prospective parents who don't share their religion. Then, on January 23rd of this year, a day after the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, which is a favorite give to the pro-life community, the Trump-Pence administration announced it too would allow all South Carolina foster care agencies to refuse to work with anyone they deem the wrong religion, granting them an explicit exemption from federal anti-discrimination regulations. Unbelievably, the Trump administration's stated basis for licensing religious discrimination is the religious freedom rights of Miracle Hill and other faith-based foster care agencies. This is why those Stanford kids aren't wrong when they say religious freedom is about discrimination these days. In February, Americans United filed a lawsuit called Madonna versus U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Pretty good, right? In U.S. federal court on behalf of Aimee Madonna to stop the federal government and South Carolina from authorizing this discrimination with taxpayer dollars. How many of you are familiar with a similar story, that of Fort Worth couple Bryn Esplin and Fatma Maroof? Anyone? A few of you? This married lesbian couple were turned away from fostering refugee children, and there are 5,800 of them in Texas right now, migrant and refugee children, because according to their federally funded foster care agency, they did not mirror the Holy Family. They have sued the Trump administration too, and Americans United Senior Litigation Counsel Ken Upton is representing Bryn and Fatma in partnership with our allies Lambda Legal. So many of his actions that Trump labels as being about protecting religious freedom are really about elevating one narrow fundamentalist interpretation of Christianity and misusing religious freedom to harm others. Here's just a few more of countless examples. In January, the Trump administration released a regulation allowing bosses and universities to refuse contraceptive coverage to employees and students. Again, because of religious or moral objections. We have sued the Trump administration to challenge this rule. We currently have 9 lawsuits pending against the Trump administration. And last week, actually, one of our young fellows, Allison Tanner, just 2 years out of law school, argued in district court in Indiana against the Trump administration's attempts to dismiss the case. And in May, so just last month, the Department of Health and Human Services released one of the most dangerous regulations that we've seen, the denial of care rule, that allows anyone in the healthcare industry to refuse to perform a service or to serve and to provide for a patient based on their moral or religious beliefs, even life-saving services. This is a rule that could allow a fertility doctor to refuse to perform services for an interfaith couple. It could allow a nurse to refuse to change the bedpan of a Jewish or Muslim patient. It could allow an emergency room worker, a custodian to a scheduler to a doctor to turn away a woman with an ectopic pregnancy whose life is in danger. And Americans United has sued the Trump administration twice on this one, once in Maryland federal court and in California with Santa Clara and Center for Reproductive Rights and Lambda Legal again. So this isn't just happening in the federal government. There's a full frontal campaign to do the same happening in many states, and obviously Texas is one of them. So you know that hopefully you know that in 2017, the Texas state legislature passed a bill to allow state-funded foster care agencies also to discriminate and turn away prospective parents, just like Aimee Madonna. And you might have heard about Project Blitz, another Christian nationalist effort to infiltrate state legislatures across the country 800 state legislatures across the country received their playbook last year. We've seen 60 of their model bills introduced this year. Of course, Texas has already passed numerous of them. The In God We Trust in public schools, Bible classes in public schools, this foster care discrimination bill. They're an escalating series of bills, 21 of them in total, to put in place a Christian nationalist viewpoint into the government through the states. And you all know that Governor Abbott recently signed the Chick-fil-A bill into law. So that bill, restates what the First Amendment largely protects, right? Your ability to associate with and give money to whoever you please or whatever causes you please. But what we know is that that bill is really about supporting this same idea of using religion to discriminate against the LGBTQ community. And there were a host of other bills. Again, I don't think I need to go into it, although I'm happy to in the Q&A, that your state legislature nearly passed, but that died in the Senate or in the House, respectively. So the million-dollar question, because these talks can get depressing. I noticed that, I go to donors and I paint this really dark picture because it's easy to paint these days. And I used to leave myself feeling a little down and wow, it almost seems like there's nothing we can do. And the million-dollar question is, what can we do? So Americans United's National Board and senior staff spent the last year thinking about this, and I want to tell you a little bit about how we think we can modernize our cause and win in the long term. So we know what we want, right? In America, where everyone is free to believe what they want, be non-religious, change their viewpoint, where religion cannot be practiced in a way that hurts other people, and where there's a strict separation of religion and government. And we know that the clock is ticking, and that we've been witnessing the opposition chipping away at our freedom every day. In our private lives, our workplaces, our health care, our government services, in critical places. And we know that too few Americans think about how important religious freedom is in our country and how foundational it is to our lives. So the answer, we think, is we have to make more noise. We have to make more noise. We have to remind people about the importance of church-state separation. Take back the meaning of true religious freedom, become more visible, and ignite a national movement in America that insists on separating religion and government. Yes, we need to continue to sue in court and to shape public policy in Congress and across the states, and we will certainly never stop doing this. But we must make sure that we are also inspiring younger Americans who are tirelessly and passionately fighting for the future of our country to put church-state separation on their priority list. And to do this, we must connect the dots between the issues that they already care about, like LGBTQ equality, racial justice, reproductive freedom, and church-state separation, right, which is at the bottom of all of those rights. We did this when, for the first time ever, Americans United just last month took a position in support of the Equality Act, which is landmark, great legislation. It's legislation that provides long overdue protections for the LGBT community, including in employment, in housing, in jury service, in government services, and public businesses. The bill contains explicit language ensuring that religious freedom cannot be used to undermine these protections. And I just want to note that that is, quite honestly, thanks to the work of you all in the room and people like you all around the country. As recently as 2008, LGBTQ equality bills, at least at the national level, like employment non-discrimination bill we called ENDA, always had quite the opposite, a religious exemption. But not anymore. This is real progress, that this Equality Act now contains a provision saying religion cannot be used to undermine the protections in this bill. So to succeed in building a national strong movement, we know that we need to broaden our supporters and find more diverse supporters, including Black and brown people. So this country is going to be a majority Black and brown by 2046. In Texas, by 2021, Latinos are going to be the plurality in this country. We do not have an adequate number of Black and brown people who are part of the church-state separation movement, and it is vital for the survival of this issue that we bring them in. And it is relevant, by the way, because religious freedom, in quotations, has been misused throughout our history to advance racism, and I'd be happy to go into that more in the Q&A. We also must deepen our ties with the faith community, even though we already have them. So the non-religious continue to be a very important group of supporters of Americans United. They are certainly one of the most threatened and disliked religious minorities in this country, even though they're growing. And I was actually quite shocked to see that even here in Texas, non-believers are 18% of the population. But we also need to remember that 70% of the country identify as Christian, and so we need to, alongside of our religious minority leaders, we need to continue to grow our Christian clergy support so that we can fight this opposition label that has been put on us, which is that we are anti-religion, right? And here I just want to pause and say that the founders of Americans United in 1948 in Chicago were a deeply religious crew. The president of the Southern Baptist Convention, Seventh-day Adventists, mostly actually Protestant clergy who were concerned about the new ties with the Vatican. So we have a very religious history in this country. And I'm very pleased to say that just a few months ago, the leader of the National Council of Churches joined our national board. That is an organization of an ecumenical organization of 38 different Christian organizations and denominations in the country. We also need to make sure that we're speaking in the most powerful and resonant ways to our different audiences, and that's why Americans United is undertaking, for the first time ever, a major public opinion research project. And we'll be very excited to share the results of this project with you in the fall. I've learned, even through fundraising on this, that public opinion research isn't a sexy topic, but I don't know why, because it holds the keys to the kingdom for us. And we're already in the qualitative phase of research where we have a religious African-American group and a white secular group that we're starting with for a qualitative phase who are saying really amazing things. Like, when I think of religious freedom, I think first and foremost of equality and inclusion, even before I think about freedom and the religious right. I mean, we're learning interesting things already, and we'll be sharing results in the fall, so stay tuned. We're also realizing that younger people aren't joiners, and that may feel right to some of you. So what does that mean? That means that we need to create state networks and have digital access to younger people and like a ladder of engagement for younger people to engage with us. So we're going to be having pilot states where we experiment with how to grow those state networks. And in March of next year, specifically the night of March 22nd, Sunday night through March 24th, we're going to be holding a brand new National Advocacy Summit in Washington. We're going to have exciting speakers like Aimee Madonna address us and members of Congress, and we're going to take our values to Capitol Hill, to our members of Congress, and make sure that we have the presence that so many other groups do too in this time of severe threat. So how can you all help build the movement on top of continuing to be the advocates that you already are? So one place to start is to help others understand why separation of religion and government is crucial to America. Explain why it's important to you personally. Tell a story to humanize it, because this issue can feel very legalistic and abstract. So before I close, I just want you all to indulge me in one fun exercise, which is this. I want you to think to yourself for a moment, why is church-state separation important to you? How would you put that into words? And once you've thought about that, I'm going to have you exchange notes with your neighbors. And we'll only do that for a minute or two. We'll have a reception after this in the lobby, and people will be able to talk more and share their views. But I think it's important to practice putting our values into words, especially on this one. So think to yourself for a minute, and then turn to your neighbor and tell them why church-state separation is important to you. And then ask your neighbor the same, and then we'll close and do a Q&A. Okay. Thank you. You all. Before I take questions, let me just say this. In the end, I know we will prevail because we are on the right side of history. And so until then, may we use our combined strength to bend the arc of our country towards equality, inclusion, and freedom for all just a little bit sooner. So thank you. And now if you have a question, raise your hand. Love to hear from you. Back there.
Hi, I don't need a microphone, I'm a lot now. I don't see this a lot in the county in which I live, but the county just north of me, all of their squad cars have In God We Trust.
Yeah.
What do I do about that? It makes me feel like, you know, I have an American atheist sticker on my van, so if I get pulled over, how do I know I'm going to be treated just as equally as somebody being pulled over for the same reason who's a Christian?
Yep. First of all, do you know that in Mississippi now, you have to actually pay money for a vanity plate not to have that on your license plate? But what can you do? Well, I'm really glad that you asked, because we have a wonderful pre-litigation program, that's what we call it, at Americans United, and an amazing staff person, one of our 9 full-time lawyers who's dedicated full-time to responding to letters and complaints that we get from folks around the country like that. It's actually heartening to see how often when we send a letter in response, which we often do not publicize because it tends to lead to more productive results, that we see a change in police system, school system, government building, etc. Sometimes we don't, but it's, often we do see responses. And when we don't, at Americans United, we need to make up our minds about when we're going to use our resources to sue, right? And I think different groups really have different strategies around this. I found it interesting when I was talking to our head of litigation, Richard Katsky, about, what should our strategy be? And this was part of our strategic thinking and planning. And we decided, we're a civil rights group. If we planned to win every lawsuit that we brought, we wouldn't be doing our job. So that's not our philosophy, but 50% of the time would be nice, heading in. Hindsight, though, is, So in short, answering your question, when you see things in your community, and this goes for all of you, that you fear or know are church-state separation violations, we have a place on our website at au.org where you can write in to us and we will respond. We respond to over 1,000 of those every year. Yep.
Are you familiar with the work of William James?
On what? Say more.
William James.
I'm not sure. I can repeat.
William James on the varieties of religious experience.
No.
Okay, so he was the first psychology professor at Harvard.
Henry James's brother.
Yeah.
Okay, so and he also gave a series of lectures in Edinburgh about dealing with medical determinism and religion. So he wrote the first psychology book that identified and categorized psychological aberrations in human beings. And so what he determined is that religions, especially American religions at that time, it's about 1890, where there were, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there were some bizarre cults, and that was kind of the rule rather than the norm in America. So what he determined is that most religious experience, in the United States at least, was certifiably insane. And so you didn't want, and this was a scientific discussion, right? So what you didn't want is people that were insane making public policy. But what I would encourage you to do is to read about those lectures only because that discussion happened, and it was a very difficult one to happen at that period in history. And it was quite remarkable how he handled this conversation of the difference between science and religion and keeping insanity out of public policy.
I mean, I would just say in response to that, that Americans United certainly stands up in situations where there's an effort through the government to impose religion on all of us, or for religion to supplant science. I'm thinking of our Dover, Pennsylvania lawsuit against, intelligent design, where we won a huge case in the school system. So we're always there, in instances like that. We are not a group that criticizes religion, right? We celebrate. You can be part of the Church of Bacon. Have you heard of it? It exists. Right. So, you can believe whatever it is you want. What we believe is that our country is intentionally a diverse and vibrant place, and we're stronger that way. We've welcomed people from different nations, different religions to our shores. Right now, we have, many say, about 2,000 religions in our land. And what our job is to do is to protect everyone's right to believe whatever it is they want, because what we recognize as a group is that is so core to people's identities that people are even willing to die for it. I mean, it's...
My point's just a little bit different, which is it's very fascinating how William James negotiated that.
Yeah, okay, I should read it. Thank you. Send me the book. Send me the lectures. Yeah. Over there? Yeah. Not good. Not good. Crosses on... Did I hear about the crosses on the buildings in Cold Springs? Yes. Yes, I have heard of that. And tell me your name? Mallory said that she wrote to some group and she doesn't think it was AU and that they weren't going to go forward. And, firstly, you should write to us because we can send a letter as a beginning, right? So you should definitely, please do. But again, I mean, we are living in a besieged moment, right? And different groups have different philosophies, right? I love the way the Freedom from Religion Foundation sticks it to them, right? And, is always willing to sue in every case, whether we're going to win or not. Why is in God we trust on money? Why is it our national motto? Why, right? And, and that this is offensive. And, so I think different groups really spend their resources in different ways, and it takes a village. Right? So I don't know who you wrote to, but what I can tell you is that if you write to us, we'd be happy to address that with them. Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I'd like to hear more about how you plan to go about reaching out to Black churches and Latina churches, because I think that's really important.
Yep.
This is my first event that I've been to and with y'all's group, and this is a very homogenous group.
Yes, it is.
And as a brown woman,
Yep.
Yep. I feel very brown
Yep.
here.
Yes.
So, what is your plan for getting
Thank you.
into those communities?
Thank you.
Because it's going to look different than
Yep.
it does to what you're probably used
Yes,
to.
it is. Yes, it is. Thank you for that question, and thank you for pointing out something that is true, not just here in Houston. Which, Ellen, you were the fourth person in the short span of time I've been in Houston today to celebrate the diversity of this city. And nonetheless, look around the room overall. So, what is our plan? So there's a rabbi, this is a little bit of an indirect answer and then I'll get there. There's a rabbi in Ferguson who is the rabbi of a synagogue near where Michael Brown was killed in 2015. And after that happened, she decided, she's a white Jewish rabbi. Of course, about 10 to 11% of Jews are not white, but we can get into that another time. So she decided she wanted to make her synagogue more inclusive. And the most amazing thing was, instead of just saying it, like, we are welcoming, we want to be inclusive, she changed so much about the synagogue. So she changed the artwork on the walls, she changed the music, and integrated different sounds and different composers. She really changed the culture of the place. And it was only through doing it that way that she was able to truly create a welcoming environment for Black and brown Jews in Ferguson. So what I know is that we need to do the same at Americans United, and that we are at the very beginning of that journey. And I agree with you that what I think was implied in your question, that I think that one of the greatest ends for us to do that is through Black and brown churches, which are organized institutions. We have amazing potential in these communities. A friend of mine, Robbie Jones, runs a group called Public Religion Research Institute, where his research has shown that 2 to 1 African Americans think that small business owners should not be allowed to discriminate against LGBTQ people. And that's despite the fact that there is relative to the white population, a higher percentage of anti-LGBTQ sentiment in some of the Black and brown communities that he polls. Why? Why do we get those good results when it comes to the Masterpiece Cake Shop type of cases? It's because Black and brown people have seen that playbook before of religion being used to discriminate, right? And so I know that we have the material, and in fact, I have some trainings that I've done that are on what I call white Christian fragility, that play really well, for Black and brown clergy, right? And I've done it twice. But what I think we need to do is to build relationships that enable us to more meaningfully work with these communities. And that, right now we've just hired a new head of outreach and engagement, who we have Black and brown interns in the office for, I think, the first time, at least in a long time. I've only been in the organization for a year and a half. And I think it's through these baby steps and having this be part of our explicit 5-year roadmap that we created, that we're going to continue to hold ourselves to these standards and test ways to more meaningfully work with the Black and brown churches and communities. That's sort of the best I can do at this point, but that it's a high priority and that we're experimenting with it now. Thank you. What else? Jim.
Hi. Speaking of making noise, I wanted to get your opinion on the Satanic Temple, a largely humanist organization, their strategy for inserting themselves into the same sphere as the religious right.
Say more about that. Say more.
Yeah, and with that strategy, I'm curious, that pushback that they're going to get has been effective in several cases. And so I heard you talking about making noise. Where do you guys see yourselves pushing boundaries along their front? And also just what you think of their strategy as well.
Well, I think what I would say for now is, how are we making noise? Where are we making noise? We play a really important role in Washington because we are really one of the only groups of our kind that brings together the faith community and non-theists and progressive groups. Really. So when we held a meeting in our conference room about Project Blitz that I spoke about earlier, we had this amazing energy because we had someone from the NAACP, someone from the Human Rights Campaign, the lead LGBTQ equality group, someone from NARAL, Pro-Choice America, someone from the Humanists, someone from the National Council of Jewish Women, someone from the United Church of Christ, someone from the Presbyterians, this guy who just joined our board, the head of the National Council of Churches, the American Atheists. You get the point, right? It's very unusual to be able to bring together sort of folks across what standardly are thought of as almost like divides or different worlds to work together towards a cause. So right now, I'd say that one of the key ways that we're making noise is mobilizing unusual bedfellows to be able to come together to say, can't we all agree that no one should be using religion to hurt people and to discriminate in America, that that's not what our country's about, and that our secular shared values come first? And unfortunately, that's kind of noisy today, right? So, I will say this, and then I'm going to move on, and we should keep talking about it. There are those who want to protest what the religious right is doing by violating laws and putting food out for immigrants who are, trying to cross the border and claiming a progressive religious right to do that, right? So sort of like the opposite of what the religious right is doing. What we would say at Americans United is there's a place for civil disobedience in our society that's really important, right? Martin Luther King, right? Writing from jail, right? Civil disobedience, changing the country that way. And that's what we think is the right way to create change, right? Civil disobedience is better than trying to claim on either side that there's a religious freedom right to violate the law, right? So that's sort of the gist of how we play it. I hope that begins to answer your question. We'll talk more later. Yep.
I would like to hear your explanation of why there is no...
So thinkers like Roger Williams, who I referenced his quote earlier, forced worship stinks in the nostrils of God. So he was a Baptist preacher from the 1600s in this country, right? And he talked about the separation of the church from the wilderness of the state. He spoke about the same concept as early as the 1600s, as did many other thinkers, early thinkers in our country's history. What Thomas Jefferson and James Madison understood is that the linchpin of the religious freedom that they were trying to protect was separating religion and government. And that's why they named the Establishment Clause as one of the 16 words in the First Amendment. So I guess my answer to your, sure. Okay. Well, I guess my best answer for you is that laws need to encapsulate thoughts in a short number of words, relatively speaking, right? That's how we pass laws. Laws are compromise. Laws need to create standards that courts then apply later, right? So these words of free exercise together with the Establishment Clause require a separation of religion and government. They didn't need to be in there. They are baked into that First Amendment. What else?
Could you speak more about how religion has fueled racism?
Yeah. How has religion fueled racism in our country? So, across our history, the federal government has used racism, has undermined church-state separation repeatedly to advance racism. When it came to slavery, one of the early Dred Scott decisions was in the name of religion. Anti-miscegenation laws were justified in the name of religion, that it was natural order. The government used to fight the Civil Rights Amendment in Alabama and in many states in our country by talking about natural order and the importance of sort of maintaining religion in this country. And the NAACP, in their friend of the court brief for the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, lays out in detail all of the different ways throughout our history religion has been used to advance racism. So let me just actually say one more thing about this that I think is very important from the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. In that case, there is the justification that there was anti-religion, there was animus towards religion in the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. And that's why the case needed to be remanded. That's why the court couldn't rule in support of the gay couple who couldn't have their wedding cake, because there was animus in the U.S. Commission, in the Colorado Commission of Civil Rights hearing. Here's what happened in that hearing. A commissioner stated that there is a sad history in our country of religion being used to discriminate, or maybe even in our world. He certainly said in our country, he said, like when it comes to slavery and like when it comes to the Holocaust. He named those two things. So the court found that that sentiment was anti-religion. And what I think is really important to recognize is there was nothing anti-religion about that statement or inflammatory about that statement. What's inflammatory is the history, right? It's the reality, right? And all that commissioner did was name that reality. And for naming it, he was called anti-religion. And that's very scary as precedent coming from the Supreme Court in our country. And I just want to point that out about the decision. One last thing. I know that conversations on race in this country have progressed, but still a lot of us white people have a hard time speaking openly about white privilege and about sort of the history of race in our country. But it's important to open these conversations up. And I will guarantee you that if you ask really any African American today, is there a history of religion being, and African Americans in this country poll as more religious than the general population, but if you ask, is there a history of religion being used to discriminate in this country? Most will immediately nod their head and say, absolutely. So that's sort of something else that I want to say on that point. One more?
Just had a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're talking about making noise at the national level.
Yep.
Are y'all replicating that at the local level? And that's one question. The second one, what you're doing for young people, because I'm looking around and everybody looks like me.
This is young for us, actually. So obviously, Nancy could talk more about what Houston is doing. I mean, locally, what we do is when bills appear in your state legislature and you're on our list, we email you and ask you to take action, and we work with you if you want to write to us, if you want to write an op-ed. But your local chapter, Nancy was talking about making sure that everybody gets on your email list. That is exactly what they are doing, informing you all of ways to mobilize. Is that right, Nancy, and get involved? That's my understanding. So that's answer number one. Answer number two, what are we doing to involve youth? And well, again, sort of like the black and brown goals, this is a beginning. I mean, it was honestly an epiphany of all of us at the leadership level. Hey, wait a minute. If we don't make sure that we're securing the next generation, we really are risking losing this battle. So we're beginning. We have a youth leadership council already as part of the national organization, but the new National Advocacy Summit that I told you about in Washington, we're going to have a youth track. We're also looking at ways that we can forge ties and lasting ties with universities, law schools, and seminaries, and how we can have partnerships and programs, because those are the next generation of leaders who have a very natural affinity for the work that we're doing, and so we're going to reach out that way. And we have a wonderful communications team, which is growing. One of the mistakes that a lot of the advocacy groups in Washington make is we only have experts and we forget how important it is to have a communications effort to go with it. We have an amazing young new leader of our communications program and amazing folks who are doing our digital outreach, which is a job at Americans United National because it has to be. And running those campaigns, creating content that works on digital media and social media, like videos and, entertaining graphics that have a sort of modern look and feel. And one last answer, our content needs to update. So we must draw those connections between abortion and church-state separation. We must draw the connections between LGBTQ issues and diversity and the rights of Black and brown people in this country and the rights of immigrants to our issue. Again, this is not mission creep, right? This is central to what our issue is about. And when we draw those connections, we see already on social media tons of young people responding in different ways. So those are some of our early strategies, but it's another one of our priorities in our roadmap. Thank you. Ari.
Before you all go out, Al's going to say something, but I would like to say something too to some people that ask questions about what we here in Houston are doing. Some of you asked about how we can or are trying to engage younger people, or why are there not more people of color here? And those are issues that we as a chapter have been working on and have been thinking about for a long time. But as I said, we are a chapter of volunteers, and our accomplishments depend on engaging you, and you're helping with that. So if you have ideas about how to engage younger people or how to engage communities of color, please come talk to us. We want your help. If you don't have time to help us, at least you can offer your advice to us. So please come. Al wants to say a few more words.
You have the chance to do something this evening. If you are not already a member of Americans United, become a member tonight. We have a table in the lobby where you came in where you can become a member. We have many different channels that you can do that. It's important for two reasons. When Rachel speaks for us, she needs to be able to say she speaks for hundreds of thousands of Americans. And we need to financially support the marvelous professional team that works in Washington. It's really, really important. So please, if you can, become a member, become a contributor. Secondly, I doubt that anybody here is not registered to vote. But if you are not registered, or if you're not sure, we have an opportunity for you to register to vote tonight. We have a deputy registrar who is in the lobby who will help you with that. And third, we have some cookies and brownies, and we hope that you all will stick around a little bit and enjoy dessert and be able to talk to Rachel and to the rest of us. Thank you.